waves of foreign rule, but still clings to its identity. Today, we're diving into a period of ancient Egyptian history that's full of resilience, adaptation, and surprising cultural exchange. Welcome to Blind History with Josh Berry. Over the next few weeks, we will be diving into the history of Egypt. Along for the ride, we are joined by our resident Egyptian expert, who will help us explore this wonderfully rich and fascinating history. We will be maneuvering the complexities of late period Egypt. We'll be exploring how Egyptian culture persisted and even thrived amidst political upheaval and foreign influence.
I'm excited to be here. It's a fascinating period, often overlooked, but crucial for understanding the long arc of Egyptian history and its interactions with the wider Mediterranean world.
So, let's set the stage. What exactly defines the late period, and why is it significant?
The late period generally refers to the time from the mid-7th century BE to the conquest by Alexander the Great in 332 BE. Think of it as a period of both crisis and creativity. Egypt wasn't always ruled by Egyptians. During this time, there were periods of Persian rule, for example. But even then, Egyptian culture found ways to adapt and endure.
Adaptation is key, isn't it? It wasn't just about survival. It was about actively shaping their identity in a changing world. Let's talk about the Site period. That was a particularly interesting time of intellectual and artistic revival, correct?
Absolutely. The Site dynasty, in particular, saw a real renaissance. Even with the political pressures, there was a conscious effort to preserve and revive old traditions.
And that preservation took a specific form, right? It wasn't just rote copying.
Exactly. Scribes and priests played a vital role. They collected, edited, and recopied older religious and literary texts. Think of them as the guardians of Egypt's cultural memory. So,
temples weren't just places of worship. They were also centers of learning and textual preservation. That's a great point.
Precisely. They maintained sacred knowledge and passed down interpretive traditions, connecting current practices with ancient precedents. This is where we see a recurring element, the conscious effort to link the present with a glorious past. The architecture, the art, even the religious practices, all were designed to evoke a sense of continuity and legitimacy.
You mentioned art. I understand there's a term for the artistic style of the Site period.
Yes, it's often described as archaizing. It means that artists deliberately imitated older styles, like those of the Old Kingdom. Statues and reliefs might echo the proportions and compositions of earlier periods.
It sounds like they were trying to make a statement.
Absolutely. It was a way of asserting continuity, of saying that the current rulers were the rightful successors to the great pharaohs of the past. It was a powerful visual message.
But it wasn't just blind imitation, was it?
Not at all. Site artists added their own touches. There are subtle variations in detail, costume, and facial expression that distinguish late period works from their models. They were working creatively within the tradition, not trapped by it.
So, they were innovating while still paying homage to the past. That's a delicate balance.
Exactly. And that's what makes the art of this period so interesting. It's not just a pale imitation of earlier grandeur, it's a sophisticated reinterpretation.
It sounds like this period was a real high point, at least culturally. But what happened when foreign powers took over? How did the Egyptians maintain their identity there?
That's the core question, isn't it? The growing presence of Greek communities in Egypt is a defining feature of the late period. The Site kings, for example, recognized the value of Greek mercenaries and traders.
So, they weren't necessarily...
No. The Site kings granted privileges to the Greeks, even establishing Naucratis in the Delta as a designated Greek trading port and settlement. It became a point of contact between cultures.
A melting pot, in a way.
In a way, yes. But it also created tensions, of course. Different cultures interacting always do. But that interaction also spurred innovation and exchange.
Even under foreign rule, there was this negotiation happening, this give and take. Earlier you mentioned the Site dynasty and its conscious effort to connect to the past. How did this play out when the Persians came into the picture?
The Persian conquest was a major turning point. But even then, the Egyptians didn't simply disappear. The Persians governed through Egyptian institutions, even as they asserted their authority.
So it wasn't a complete overhaul?
No, it was more nuanced than that. Egyptians responded by using those same institutions to preserve as much autonomy as they could. It was a constant push and pull, a negotiation of power and identity.
It's fascinating how they use the existing structures to their advantage. It reminds me of that quote, "The master's tools will never dismantle the master's house."
That's a very astute analogy. It highlights the complex relationship between the conquered and the conqueror. The Egyptians weren't passive victims. They were active agents in shaping their own destiny.
So, what does all of this tell us about Egyptian identity in the late period? It seems like this is a time when they are constantly reaffirming who they are in the face of external pressures. What were the different ways they tried to achieve independence?
Between waves of Persian domination, Egypt experienced brief periods of renewed independence under native dynasties. These rulers typically emerged from revolts or regional power bases.
And they presented themselves as
defenders of Egyptian tradition against foreign aggression. They invested heavily in temple building and restoration, seeking divine favor and popular support by associating themselves with ancient sacred sites and rituals.
it was a deliberate strategy to connect with the past, to evoke that sense of continuity we talked about earlier.
Absolutely. As the document states, a restored king could present himself as a restorer of order, a defender of the gods, and a champion of the country's ancient identity.
That's a powerful statement. It shows how important the idea of native kingship remained, even after periods of foreign rule. The most successful of these native revivals drew strength from the combination of local loyalty and practical diplomacy.
Exactly. They weren't simply anti-foreign reactions. They were attempts to rebuild a viable Egyptian state in a difficult geopolitical environment.
So it was more than just symbolism. They needed real power, real resources.
Indeed, these kings knew that survival depended on more than ritual language. They needed allies, resources, garrisons, and the support of temple elites who could help bind the country together.
It sounds like a constant balancing act.
It was. They were navigating a complex web of internal and external pressures. They had to be both conservative and realistic, reverent of the past, and tactically engaged in the present.
So, even in these brief periods of independence, the shadow of foreign powers loomed large.
Constantly, the Achaemenid Empire remained a formidable presence, and Greek city-states and other regional powers pursued their own interests in the eastern Mediterranean.
It paints a picture of a civilization under constant pressure, constantly adapting, and constantly reaffirming its identity. We talked about the Site period and the conscious revival of older traditions. Then we discussed how Egyptians used existing institutions under Persian rule to maintain autonomy. And now these brief periods of independence where rulers presented themselves as defenders of Egyptian identity. This all brings up a question that I think we should examine. How accurate is our perception of the late period? Is there a common assumption that we need to challenge?
I think a common assumption is that the late period was simply a period of decline, a pale imitation of earlier greatness. But that misses the sophistication and resilience of the era. It ignores the ways in which Egyptian culture adapted and evolved in response to changing circumstances.
So, it's not just about decline, it's about transformation.
Exactly. It's about seeing how Egyptian identity persisted and even thrived in the face of political upheaval and foreign influence. It's about recognizing the agency of the Egyptian people in shaping their own destiny.
That's a crucial point. It's about shifting our perspective from one of passive victimhood to one of active resilience. So as we begin to wrap up, can you give us a concise takeaway from our deep dive into late period Egypt?
The most important insight, I think, is that Egyptian identity in the late period was not static or monolithic. It was a dynamic and evolving process, shaped by both internal traditions and external pressures. The Egyptians were not simply clinging to the past, they were actively creating a new future for themselves.
Does this matter now? Why should we care about what happened in Egypt over 2,000 years ago?
Because it offers valuable lessons about cultural resilience, adaptation, and the enduring power of identity. In a world that is increasingly interconnected and globalized, it's more important than ever to understand how cultures can maintain their unique character in the face of external pressures. Egypt's story in the late period is a testament to the human capacity for survival, adaptation, and cultural innovation.
That's a powerful message. We will wrap it up here for today, but stay tuned for more history of Egypt. The full audio article will be released this upcoming Sunday for a thorough exploration of this fascinating history. Next, we will be exploring Ptolemaic Egypt and Cleopatra VII. Join us next time on Blind History with Josh Berry. And I'll leave you with this. It makes you wonder, what aspects of our own culture will endure, and how will they be transformed by the challenges of the future?